The night Rebecca Norton spun beneath the vast Nevada sky, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. But then again, moments before destiny rarely announce themselves with fanfare. She had wandered away from the dusty streets of Verde, Nevada, where the sounds of the saloon and the railroad workers still echoed faintly in the distance. It was September 1878, and the air carried that peculiar crispness that comes when summer reluctantly surrenders to autumn. The stars stretched overhead like scattered diamonds on black velvet, and Rebecca could not help herself. With no audience but the sagebrush and the distant mountains, she lifted her skirts just enough to move freely and began to dance. Her feet remembered the steps her mother had taught her back in Philadelphia, before the fever took her, before Rebecca had to flee west with nothing but a carpet bag and desperation. She hummed a melody, something soft and melancholic as she turned and swayed, her long auburn hair coming loose from its pins. For these precious moments, she was not a seamstress working her fingers raw, not a woman alone in a rough frontier town, not someone running from memories of a father who drank away their future. She was simply a woman dancing under stars that cared nothing for human troubles. Owen Hayes had been riding back to his small ranch outside Verde when he spotted her. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks after a long day of mending fences and chasing down strays. But no, there she was, a figure in a simple calico dress, moving with such grace that she seemed to float rather than touch the earth. He reined in his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Rosie, and sat quietly in his saddle, transfixed. Owen was 26 years old, weathered beyond his years by hard work and harder winters, but his heart had remained surprisingly tender. He had come west from Missouri 5 years earlier with dreams of making something of himself, and while his ranch was modest, it was his. He rarely ventured into town except for supplies, preferring the company of cattle and silence. But something about this woman dancing alone compelled him to dismount, to take off his worn Stetson, to approach with careful steps so as not to startle her. Rebecca was mid-turn when she sensed rather than heard him. She froze, her heart hammering, wondering if this was one of the rough men from the railroads, if she had been foolish to wander so far from the relative safety of town. But when she turned fully, she saw a man standing a respectful distance away, hat in hand, his expression more awed than threatening. "I apologize for interrupting, miss," Owen said, his voice deep but gentle. "I saw you dancing, and well, I have not seen anything so beautiful in a long time. May I join you?" Rebecca's first instinct was to refuse, to gather her dignity and hurry back to town. She had learned to be cautious around men, especially out here where civilization was still a fragile thing. But there was something in his eyes, a kindness that seemed genuine, and she found herself nodding before her mind could overrule her heart. "I should warn you," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "I have no music except what I hum." Owen smiled then, and it transformed his entire face from merely handsome to something that made Rebecca's breath catch. "I reckon that's music enough." He stepped closer, leaving his horse to graze peacefully, and extended his hand. Rebecca placed hers in it, noting the calluses that spoke of honest work, the gentle way he held her fingers as though she were made of something precious. They began to move together, awkwardly at first, finding their rhythm. Owen was no practiced dancer, but he was steady and considerate, and Rebecca found herself relaxing into the strange intimacy of it. "I'm Owen Hayes," he said as they turned slowly beneath the stars. "I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Rebecca Norton," she replied. "I work at Mrs. Patterson's dress shop in town." "I have seen you," Owen admitted. "A few weeks back when I came in for supplies. You were in the window sewing. The light caught your hair and I nearly walked into a post staring." Rebecca laughed despite herself, the sound surprised and genuine. "Well, I hope you did not injure yourself on my account. Only my pride when old Charlie Simmons saw and would not let me forget it for a week." They continued dancing, and Rebecca began to hum again, a livelier tune this time. Owen matched her pace, spinning her gently, and for those moments under the Nevada stars nothing else existed. Not the rough town, not the uncertain future, not the scars they each carried. Just two people moving together, finding unexpected grace. When the dance finally slowed and stopped, they stood facing each other, neither quite ready to break the spell. Owen still held her hand. "Would you think me too forward if I asked to see you again?" he asked. "Properly, I mean, maybe a picnic or a walk." Rebecca knew she should be cautious, should protect herself. But she had been careful for so long, and where had it gotten her? Alone and working until her eyes blurred, saving pennies that never seemed to amount to anything. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance she had been too afraid to hope for. "I would like that," she said softly. "I have Sunday afternoons free." "Then Sunday it is," Owen replied, his smile returning. "I will meet you at noon by the church." "By the church," Rebecca agreed. Owen reluctantly released her hand, retrieved his hat and walked back to his horse. Before mounting, he turned back. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Norton. It was the finest moment of my month. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Hayes." She watched him ride away into the darkness, then stood alone again under the stars, but she felt entirely different. Her heart felt lighter, fuller, as though something that had been locked away had finally found air to breathe. The walk back to town seemed shorter than usual. Rebecca lived in a small room above the dress shop, a cramped space but her own. Mrs. Patterson, her employer, was a practical woman in her 50s who had taken Rebecca in when she first arrived in Verdi, desperate and nearly penniless. The older woman asked few questions and paid fair wages, which made her an angel as far as Rebecca was concerned. That night, Rebecca lay in her narrow bed and could not sleep. She kept replaying the dance, the feel of Owen's hand in hers, the way he had looked at her as though she were someone worth treasuring. She had been courted before, back in Philadelphia, by a banker's son who turned out to want nothing more than a pretty ornament for his arm. That had ended badly, with assumptions made and her reputation nearly ruined. It was part of why leaving had seemed the only option, but Owen felt different. She could not explain it rationally, but some deep instinct told her he was a good man. Still, she would be careful. She would watch and learn and not give her heart away foolishly. Sunday came with agonizing slowness. Rebecca threw herself into her work, carefully stitching a wedding dress for the banker's daughter, but her mind kept wandering. Mrs. Patterson noticed but said nothing, though Rebecca caught the older woman watching her with a knowing smile more than once. When Sunday finally arrived, Rebecca changed her dress 3 times before settling on a modest blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She pinned her hair carefully, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face, and studied herself in the small mirror. She looked nervous, hopeful, terrified. She looked alive in a way she had not in months. Owen was waiting by the church when she arrived, looking equally nervous in clean trousers and a pressed shirt. He held a basket that smelled wonderfully of fresh bread and something savory. "Miss Norton," he greeted, his face lighting up. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You clean up rather well yourself." They walked together toward the edge of town, where the landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with sage and the occasional scrubby pine. Owen led her to a spot near a small creek, where cottonwood trees provided dappled shade. He spread a blanket and they sat together, unpacking the basket. "I cannot claim credit for most of this," Owen admitted, pulling out bread, cheese, cold chicken, and apples. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, took pity on me when I mentioned I needed help with a picnic. She is a far better cook than I will ever be. Then I shall have to thank Mrs. Chen, Rebecca said, accepting a piece of bread. This looks wonderful. They ate and talked, sharing pieces of their lives like treasures pulled from deep pockets. Owen told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, the third of 5 children, and how he had always dreamed of having land of his own. His parents were still alive, still farming, and wrote him letters that took weeks to arrive. He spoke of them with obvious affection. "You miss them?" Rebecca asked. "Every day," Owen admitted. "But I needed to do this to prove to myself I could build something. My father understood, even if my mother cried for a week before I left." Rebecca told him about Philadelphia, about her mother's death when she was 16, about her father's descent into drink and debt. She found herself sharing more than she intended, about the banker's son and the ugly scene when she refused his improper advances, about the rumors that followed. "I had to leave," she said quietly, staring at the creek. "My reputation was ruined, and my father could not protect me even if he wanted to. So I took what little money my mother had hidden away and bought a ticket west. I ended up in Verdi because the train stopped here and I had run out of funds." Owen was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca feared she had shared too much, revealed herself as damaged goods. But when he spoke, his voice was firm and warm. "That man was a fool and a scoundrel," he said, "and those who believed him over you were worse. You did what you had to do to survive, to protect yourself. That takes more courage than most folks ever need to find." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and hot. She could not remember the last time someone had defended her, had taken her side without question. "Thank you," she whispered. Owen reached over and gently took her hand, just as he had when they danced. "We all have things in our past, Rebecca. What matters is who we choose to be going forward." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the creek burble past, listening to the birds call to each other in the cottonwoods. Rebecca felt something settle in her chest, a peace she had not known in years. "Tell me about your ranch," she said eventually, wanting to shift to lighter topics. Owen's eyes brightened, and he launched into descriptions of his land, his small herd of cattle, the cabin he had built with his own hands. He spoke of plans to expand, of dreams of breeding quality horses, of wanting to build something lasting. "It is not much yet," he said, almost apologetically. "The cabin is small, just 2 rooms really, and there is always more work than hours in the day, but it is mine and I love it." "It sounds wonderful," Rebecca said honestly. "I think having something of your own, something you built, must be the finest feeling in the world." "Would you like to see it?" Owen asked, then quickly added, "I mean properly, with a chaperone if you prefer." "I know it would not be appropriate otherwise." Rebecca considered. She trusted Owen, she realized, more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. But she also knew how easily reputations could be destroyed, especially in a small town like Verdi. "Perhaps we could invite Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen," she suggested. "Make an afternoon of it. I would very much like to see your ranch." Owen's smile was brilliant. "That would be perfect. Next Sunday." "Next Sunday," Rebecca agreed. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared opinions on books neither had time to read and dreams both were afraid to voice too loudly. When the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, Owen walked Rebecca back to town, carrying the basket and staying a respectful distance that nonetheless felt intimate. At the door to the dress shop, they paused. Owen set down the basket and took both her hands in his. "I know it has only been 2 times meeting," he said, his voice low and serious. "But I feel like I have known you much longer, like I have been waiting to meet you without even realizing I was waiting." Rebecca's heart thundered in her chest. "I feel it too," she admitted. "It frightens me a little." "Me too," Owen said with a soft laugh, "but the good kind of frightened, if that makes sense." "It does." He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Until next Sunday, Rebecca. Until next Sunday, Owen." She watched him walk away, then floated up the stairs to her room, feeling like she was still dancing under the stars. The week passed in a blur of stitching and measuring and fitting, but Rebecca's mind was always partly elsewhere. Mrs. Patterson finally cornered her on Wednesday, amusement dancing in her eyes. "All right, child, who is he?" she demanded. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I do not know what you mean." "Oh, please, I have not seen a girl moon about like this since my own daughter fell for her husband." "You have been humming, smiling at nothing, and you pricked your finger twice yesterday without even noticing. So who is the lucky man?" Rebecca found herself confessing everything, from the dance under the stars to the picnic by the creek. Mrs. Patterson listened with growing approval. "Owen Hayes," she mused. "I know of him. Keeps to himself mostly, but always pays his debts and treats folks fair. You could do far worse, Rebecca." "He asked if we might visit his ranch this Sunday," Rebecca said hesitantly, "and he suggested I bring a chaperone." "I was hoping you might agree to come." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Of course I will, dear girl. I am honored you asked, and I am glad he had the sense to suggest it proper-like. Shows he respects you." When Sunday arrived, it brought Owen driving a wagon with Mrs. Chen sitting beside him, her weathered face creased in a smile. The Chinese woman was in her 60s, a widow who had stayed in Nevada after her husband died working on the railroad. She ran a boarding house and was known for her excellent cooking and no-nonsense attitude. "Miss Norton," Owen greeted, hopping down to help her into the wagon bed where he had arranged blankets and cushions to make the ride comfortable. Mrs. Patterson climbed up beside her, and they set off north toward Owen's ranch. The land opened up around them, vast and beautiful in its starkness. Rebecca understood why Owen loved it. There was something honest about this landscape, something that demanded you see it clearly without pretense or decoration. The ranch, when they arrived, was exactly as Owen had described. A sturdy cabin sat in a small valley, with a barn, a corral, and scattered out buildings. Cattle grazed on the hillside, and a vegetable garden showed signs of careful tending near the house. Owen gave them a tour, his pride evident but not boastful. The cabin was indeed small but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, and a bedroom partitioned off with a curtain. Everything was clean and organized, if Spartan. "I know it is not fancy," Owen said to Rebecca as they stood in the main room. "But the roof does not leak, and the stove draws well." "It is a good home," Rebecca said firmly. "Anyone can see the care you have put into it." Mrs. Chen had brought food for a meal, and they ate at the rough-hewn table Owen had made himself. The older women regaled them with stories of early Verdi, of the wild days when the railroad first came through, and the town was little more than tents and optimism. After the meal, Owen offered to show Rebecca the rest of the property. Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen exchanged knowing looks but nodded their approval, settling in to clean up and gossip comfortably. Owen and Rebecca walked toward the creek that ran along his southern boundary, the same creek they had picnicked beside the previous week, just further upstream. "I used to come here in the evenings," Owen said as they stood watching the water. "Before I met you, I mean, I would sit and think and plan, but now when I come here all I can think about is you." Rebecca felt her breath catch. "Owen." He turned to face her, taking her hands. "I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know people would say I am rushing, being foolish. But Rebecca, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. When I saw you dancing under those stars, it was like my whole world shifted. Everything suddenly had color it did not have before. I feel the same, Rebecca whispered. I tried to tell myself to be sensible, to be cautious, but my heart does not seem to care about being sensible. I want to court you properly, Owen said. I want to do this right, give you time to be sure. But I also want you to know that my intentions are serious. I am looking for a wife, Rebecca, a partner, someone to build a life with. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy ones. I want that too. I have been so alone for so long, Owen. I had almost given up on finding someone who saw me as more than just a convenience or a pretty face. You are so much more, Owen said fiercely. You are strong and brave and kind. You are beautiful, yes, but it is your spirit that takes my breath away. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Rebecca let herself lean into his solid warmth. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other beside the creek, while the Nevada sun shone down and the future seemed suddenly bright with possibility. The courtship that followed was sweet and proper and deepened with each passing week. Owen came to town every Sunday after church, and they would walk together, always properly chaperoned, always mindful of appearances. But stolen glances and held hands spoke volumes. Rebecca learned the rhythms of Owen's life, the way he rose before dawn to tend the animals, the care he took with even the smallest tasks. Owen learned Rebecca's moods, could read when she was tired or worried, knew how to make her laugh when the weight of the world seemed too heavy. 2 months into their courtship, Owen appeared at the dress shop on a Wednesday evening, hat in hand, looking nervous. Mrs. Patterson took one look at him and called Rebecca down from her room. "Mr. Hayes is here to see you, dear. I will be in the back if you need me, but I suspect you will want privacy for this conversation." Rebecca's heart began to race as she came down the stairs. Owen stood in the shop, surrounded by half-finished dresses and bolts of fabric, looking completely out of place and entirely beloved. "Owen, is something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually, which is why I could not wait until Sunday." He took a deep breath. "I spoke to your father." Rebecca froze. "You what?" "I wrote to him to Philadelphia. I know you said you left on bad terms, but I wanted to do this properly. I told him about myself, about my ranch, about my intentions toward you, and I asked for his blessing to marry you." Rebecca felt dizzy. She had not spoken to her father in over a year, had tried not to think about him. "What did he say?" Owen pulled a letter from his pocket. He wrote back, "Rebecca, he is sober. He has been for 6 months. He joined a temperance society and has been working to pay off his debts. He said leaving was the best thing you could have done, that he was not fit to be your father back then, but he is trying to be better. And he said he would be honored to have me as a son-in-law if you will have me." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. Her father was sober. Her father was getting better. It felt like a miracle she had not dared to pray for. "There is more," Owen said gently. He dropped to one knee right there among the dresses, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "Rebecca Norton, I love you. I love your strength and your gentleness, your courage and your kindness. I love the way you hum when you work and the way you dance under the stars. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life loving you if you will let me. Will you marry me?" Rebecca could barely see through her tears, but she did not need to see to know her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around in the middle of the shop, both of them laughing and crying at once. Mrs. Patterson appeared from the back room, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "Well, it is about time," the older woman declared. I was beginning to think you would dance around each other until winter." Owen set Rebecca down but kept his arms around her. "Would you mind if I stole your seamstress, Mrs. Patterson? I promised to bring her back by 9. "Oh, I think I can manage without her for one evening," Mrs. Patterson said with a wave of her hand. "Go on, celebrate. But remember, this is still a small town, so keep it respectable." They walked through Verdi as the sun set, Rebecca's hand tucked into Owen's arm, the ring on her finger catching the fading light. They ended up at the same spot where they had first danced, and without discussion, Owen took her in his arms and they began to move together under the emerging stars. "When?" Rebecca asked as they swayed. "When should we marry?" "Tomorrow would not be soon enough for me," Owen admitted. "But I suppose we should be practical. Christmas. That gives us 2 months to prepare, and it seems fitting somehow, starting our life together at the beginning of a new year." "Christmas," Rebecca agreed. "I will make my own dress, something simple but beautiful." "You could wear a flower sack and be beautiful," Owen said, making her laugh. They danced until the stars filled the sky, until the night grew cold enough that Owen insisted on giving Rebecca his jacket. He walked her back to the shop, kissed her hand at the door, and promised to see her Sunday. Rebecca floated up to her room and immediately pulled out her writing paper. She had a letter to write to her father, words of forgiveness and hope, and an invitation to her wedding if he felt able to make the journey. The next 2 months were a whirlwind of preparation. Rebecca worked on her wedding dress in the evenings, a creation of ivory silk that Mrs. Patterson had ordered specially from San Francisco as a wedding gift. The design was simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high neckline appropriate for a winter wedding. Owen spent his spare time adding onto the cabin, creating a proper bedroom and expanding the main room. Mrs. Chen helped him sew curtains, and several neighbors donated furniture and household goods. The ranching community might be scattered and rough, but they took care of their own. 3 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca received a letter from her father. His handwriting was shaky but clear. He could not make the journey, he wrote. His health was not good enough for such a trip, but he sent his blessing and his love. Enclosed was a cameo that had belonged to Rebecca's mother, something Rebecca had thought lost to her father's debts. He had kept it safe, he wrote, hoping someday to give it back to her. He wanted her to wear it on her wedding day and know that her mother would have been so proud of the woman she had become. Rebecca cried over that letter, but they were healing tears. The past was not erased, but it was no longer a weight dragging her down. She was making peace with where she had come from, even as she stepped forward into her future. The wedding took place on a clear, cold Christmas morning at the small church in Verdi. Nearly the whole town turned out, curious about the quiet rancher and the seamstress who had captured his heart. Rebecca wore her ivory dress and her mother's cameo, her hair pinned up with winter flowers Mrs. Chen had somehow procured. Owen wore a new suit, stiff and uncomfortable but cleaned up so handsomely that Rebecca's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. The ceremony was simple, the words traditional, but when Owen took Rebecca's hands and promised to love and cherish her all his days, his voice shook with emotion. When Rebecca promised the same, she meant every word with her whole heart. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, and Owen did, gently and thoroughly, to the applause and hoots of approval from the assembled guests. The reception was held at the boarding house, Mrs. Chen having refused to hear otherwise. There was food and music, dancing and laughter. Rebecca danced with Owen, with Charlie Simmons, with several ranchers she barely knew but who welcomed her warmly into their community. She felt wrapped in belonging, in acceptance, in love. As the sun began to set, Owen and Rebecca slipped away, climbing into the wagon for the ride to their ranch. Their home, Rebecca corrected herself. It was her home now, too. The cabin glowed with lamplight when they arrived, and Owen carried Rebecca over the threshold as tradition demanded. Inside, everything was clean and ready. A fire burning in the stove, the bed made with a quilt Mrs. Chen had given them as a wedding gift. Owen set Rebecca down gently, and suddenly they were both shy, aware that everything had changed, that they were truly husband and wife now. "Are you happy?" Owen asked, taking her hands. "Happier than I have ever been," Rebecca said honestly. "Are you?" "I feel like the luckiest man alive," Owen replied. "I keep thinking I will wake up and this will all be a dream." Rebecca reached up and touched his face, feeling the scratch of stubble, the warmth of his skin. "It is real," she whispered. "We are real." Owen pulled her close and kissed her, deeper than he had at the church, with all the passion and promise of their new life together. Rebecca kissed him back, pouring all her love and trust and hope into that kiss. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people learning each other, giving and receiving with equal measure. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure Rebecca felt safe and cherished. Rebecca gave herself fully, trusting him with her body as she had already trusted him with her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking softly about everything and nothing. Owen traced patterns on Rebecca's shoulder, marveling that she was really his wife. Rebecca listened to his heartbeat under her ear and felt more at home than she had since her mother died. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Owen replied, kissing the top of her head. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know it." The first months of marriage brought adjustments, as all marriages do. Rebecca had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the ordered world of the dress shop. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to tend the chickens Owen had bought her, to help with tasks around the ranch. Owen learned to accommodate another person in his space, to remember he was no longer alone, to ask rather than assume. But they learned together, with patience and humor and growing intimacy. They established their own rhythms, their own traditions. Every night before bed, no matter how tired they were, they would step outside and look at the stars together, remembering that first night when everything began. And whenever the mood struck, Rebecca would dance and Owen would join her, two people moving as one under the vast Nevada sky. Winter gave way to spring, and Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen on a Sunday morning as they lay in bed, the sun just beginning to light the room. "I think we are going to have a baby," she said, her hand on her still flat stomach. Owen went very still, then sat up, his eyes wide. "A baby, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I am sure." Owen let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens and pulled Rebecca into his arms. "A baby, we are going to have a baby," he pulled back, suddenly concerned. "Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" Rebecca laughed at his panic. "I am fine, Owen. Women have been having babies for thousands of years. I am healthy and strong, and I have months yet before the child comes." But Owen fussed over her anyway, insisting she do less work, eat more food, rest more often. Rebecca tolerated it with amusement and affection, knowing it came from love. As her belly swelled with the coming child, the ranch prospered. Owen's careful breeding and hard work paid off with healthy calves and good prices. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, able to save a little and plan for the future. Rebecca kept in touch with Mrs. Patterson and helped with sewing when she could, mostly simple alterations and repairs she could do at home. She missed the work sometimes, missed the satisfaction of creating something beautiful, but she loved her new life more. In October, on a crisp autumn morning much like the one when they first met, Rebecca went into labor. Owen rode like mad to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, who arrived calm and capable. For 12 long hours, Rebecca labored while Owen paced outside, prayed, and generally drove himself half crazy with worry. Finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry split the air. Mrs. Chen opened the bedroom door, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Hayes. A big, healthy boy. And your wife is tired but well." Owen rushed in to find Rebecca propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced, squalling infant wrapped in a blanket. "Owen," she said softly, "meet your son." Owen approached slowly, as if in a dream, and looked down at the tiny, perfect human they had created. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused dark eyes, his little fists waving. "He is beautiful," Owen whispered, awed. "You are both so beautiful." He leaned down and kissed Rebecca gently. Thank you for everything." "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, holding their son, Rebecca knew. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Henry Hayes, after both our fathers." Owen's eyes filled with tears. His father's name was Henry, and Rebecca was naming their son partly for him, and Thomas for her own father, who had found his way back to himself even if he could not be with them. "Thomas Henry Hayes," Owen repeated. "It is perfect." The early days with a newborn were exhausting but wonderful. Rebecca had never imagined she could love something as much as she loved this tiny person who depended on her for everything. Owen was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that somehow worked. They sent letters and a photograph to both sets of grandparents. Owen's parents wrote back immediately, thrilled and already planning a visit come spring. Rebecca's father's letter took longer, but when it came, it was full of joy and regret in equal measure. He was proud of her, he wrote, so very proud. And he was working every day to be worthy of someday meeting his grandson. The years that followed were full and good. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. When he was 2, Rebecca became pregnant again, and this time delivered a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose. 2 years after that came another son, Michael Owen. The cabin expanded along with the family, Owen adding rooms as they needed them. The ranch grew too, slowly but steadily, until they had a respectable herd and a solid reputation. Owen hired a couple of ranch hands, young men looking to learn the trade, and the place bustled with activity and life. Rebecca never returned to sewing professionally, but she made clothes for her children and taught Elizabeth the art when the girl showed interest. She became known in the community as someone you could turn to for help, always ready with a meal for a sick neighbor or a kind word for someone struggling. Owen's parents visited twice, long journeys that exhausted them but filled them with joy. Rebecca's father never made the trip, his health too fragile, but they corresponded regularly, and Rebecca made her peace with the relationship they could have rather than mourning the one they had lost. On their 10th anniversary, Owen surprised Rebecca by organizing a dance in Verdi, inviting the whole community. As the fiddlers played and neighbors twirled across the floor of the schoolhouse they had all helped build, Owen led Rebecca outside for a moment of quiet. 10 years, he said, pulling her close. 10 years since I saw you dancing under the stars and my life changed forever. Best decision you ever made asking to join me, Rebecca teased, but her eyes were soft. Best decision I ever made was loving you, Owen corrected. Everything good in my life comes from that night, from you saying yes. They danced together in the cool night air, moving to music only they could hear, while inside the celebration continued. Their children were being fawned over by neighbors, safe and loved and part of a community that had embraced them all. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked suddenly. "Giving up the dress shop, the town life for this?" Rebecca pulled back to look at him, surprised. "Not for a single moment." "Owen, you gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to hope for. A home, a family, a place to belong. How could I regret that? I just want you to be happy," Owen said quietly. "I am," Rebecca assured him. "I am so happy sometimes it scares me. I keep thinking it cannot possibly last, that something will come and take it all away." "Nothing is taking this away," Owen said fiercely. "I will make sure of it. We have built something strong, Rebecca. A good life, a good family, that does not just disappear." He was right. The years continued to roll past, bringing the normal troubles and joys of any life. Cattle got sick, droughts came and went, children scraped knees and caught colds. But through it all, Owen and Rebecca stood together, their love the bedrock on which everything else was built. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Elizabeth showed an artistic streak, drawing and painting everything she saw, her mother's eye for beauty translated into images. Michael was the quiet one, thoughtful and kind, always rescuing injured animals and nursing them back to health. When Rebecca was 42 and thought her childbearing days well behind her, she discovered she was pregnant once more. The whole family was shocked, but the surprise turned to joy. At 43, Rebecca delivered twin girls, Sarah and Catherine, who arrived healthy and howling into a household that welcomed them with open arms. Owen, now 50 and graying at the temples, held his infant daughters and laughed. "I guess we were not done yet." "Apparently not," Rebecca agreed, tired but smiling. "I hope you are ready to do this all over again." "With you," Owen said, "I am ready for anything." The twins grew up adored by their older siblings, passed between willing arms and spoiled shamelessly. The ranch, now run jointly by Owen and Thomas, continued to thrive. Elizabeth married a teacher who came to Verde and settled there, opening a small art supply store. Michael became a veterinarian, studying through correspondence courses and apprenticing with the traveling vet who served the ranches around Verde. Through it all, Owen and Rebecca remained each other's constants. They still stepped out every night to look at the stars. They still danced whenever the mood struck them, though their movements were slower now, tempered by age and the aches that come with a life of hard work. On a summer evening when Rebecca was 65 and Owen 70, they sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sun set over the Nevada hills they had called home for nearly 4 decades. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the property, the sounds of laughter and play floating on the warm air. "You remember," Rebecca said softly, "that night I danced under the stars." "Every detail," Owen replied. "I remember thinking I had never seen anything so beautiful. I was terrified to approach you, terrified you would send me away." "I almost did," Rebecca admitted. "I was scared, of men, of trusting, of hoping for something better." "I am glad you were brave," Owen said. "I am glad you were too," Rebecca replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. "We built a good life, Owen Hayes. We did, Rebecca Hayes. We really did." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their youngest daughters, now women grown at 22, came out onto the porch. Sarah was engaged to be married, while Catherine had decided to become a teacher like her brother-in-law. "Papa, Mama," Sarah said, "we want to learn the dance, the one you two do." Owen and Rebecca exchanged glances, then smiled. Owen stood and offered his hand to Rebecca. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Hayes?" "You may, Mr. Hayes." They moved to the center of the yard, and Rebecca began to hum the same melody she had hummed that first night. Owen took her in his arms and they began to dance, their movements still graceful despite the years, still perfectly in sync. Their daughters watched, then joined in, dancing together and laughing. Soon the whole family had gathered, dancing under the emerging stars, 3 generations celebrating love and life and the choices that had brought them all together. Owen pulled Rebecca close as they swayed together. "I would do it all again," he whispered in her ear. "Every moment, every choice, every dance, as long as they all led me to you. And I would say yes every time," Rebecca whispered back. "To the dance, to you, to this life. Every single time." The years that followed were gentler, slower. Owen and Rebecca passed the day-to-day running of the ranch fully to Thomas and his wife, though they still helped where they could. They became the family's storytellers, the keepers of history, telling their grandchildren about the old days, about the wild town Verde used to be, about finding love when you least expected it. Rebecca's father passed away when she was 68, having lived 15 years sober and at peace with himself. She mourned him and celebrated him in equal measure, glad that he had found redemption even if it came late. Owen's parents had passed years earlier, within months of each other, as longtime couples sometimes do. But life continued, as it always does. Grandchildren grew and married and had children of their own. The ranch expanded and evolved with changing times. The railroad that had brought Rebecca to Verde became less central as automobiles began to appear, though the town remained small and close-knit. Through it all, Owen and Rebecca were the heart of their family, the example everyone looked to of what love could be. They had their disagreements over the years, their difficult moments, but they always came back to each other, always chose each other, always remembered what mattered. On an autumn morning when Rebecca was 78 and Owen 83, they sat together at the breakfast table in comfortable silence. Owen read the newspaper while Rebecca worked on a letter to a granddaughter away at college in San Francisco. The sun streamed through the windows, warming the room. Owen set down his paper and looked at his wife, still beautiful to him after all these years. Her auburn hair was white now, her face lined with decades of smiles and worries, but her eyes were the same green that had captivated him that first night. "Rebecca," he said softly. She looked up, smiling. "Yes, love. I just wanted to say thank you for saying yes to that first dance. For saying yes to marrying me. For saying yes to this life we built together. You made me happier than I ever thought possible." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, though she was smiling. "Owen Hayes, you are getting sentimental in your old age. Can you blame me? I am married to the most wonderful woman who ever lived." She got up and walked around the table, leaning down to kiss him softly. "And I am married to the best man I ever met. I love you, Owen. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Owen replied, pulling her down to sit in his lap as he had done countless times over the years. "Forever and always." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and in memories, in love that had been tested by time and found more than strong enough. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at 85. He went to bed beside Rebecca as he had every night for nearly 60 years, kissed her good night, and simply did not wake. Rebecca held his hand and wept, feeling as though part of her soul had been torn away, but she also felt grateful. They had had such a good life, so many years together. Not everyone was that blessed. The funeral was large, the church overflowing with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, neighbors, and friends whose lives Owen had touched. Rebecca sat in the front row, surrounded by her family, and listened to the stories of her husband's kindness, his integrity, his love. She knew she should feel devastated, lost, alone. And part of her did. But part of her felt Owen still beside her, still holding her hand, still loving her across whatever divide death had created. She lived another 3 years, long enough to see all her children settled and happy, to meet several more great-grandchildren, to put her affairs in order. She spent her days working in the garden, writing letters, and telling stories to any grandchild who would listen. And every night, she went outside and looked at the stars, remembering a cowboy who had asked to join her dance and changed her life forever. On a clear September night, almost exactly 63 years after that first dance, Rebecca Norton Hayes passed away peacefully in the home Owen had built for her. She was 81 years old, surrounded by family and love. Her last words were to Thomas, who sat holding her hand. "Tell them," she whispered, "tell them all that love is real, that it lasts, that it is worth every risk, every fear. Tell them to dance under the stars and say yes to the good things life offers." "I will, Mama," Thomas promised, tears streaming down his face. "I will tell them." Rebecca smiled, closed her eyes, and let go. Those who were there swore later that at the moment she passed, a warm breeze blew through the room despite all the windows being closed, and they could swear they heard music, faint and sweet, like someone humming a waltz. The funeral was held on a Sunday, and afterward, the entire family gathered at the ranch. As the sun began to set, someone started humming the melody Rebecca had always danced to. Without discussion, without planning, couples began to dance in the yard, swaying together under the emerging stars. Thomas danced with his wife. Elizabeth and her husband joined in. Michael and his partner moved together. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren, even the youngest ones, all danced. And in the middle of it all, standing together at the porch, Thomas could have sworn he saw his parents, young again, dancing together one more time, Rebecca's head on Owen's shoulder, both of them at peace. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations who all knew the story of how it began. Of a woman dancing alone under the stars and a cowboy brave enough to ask if he could join her. Of a love that built a legacy, that proved that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, but are brave enough to say yes anyway. And on clear nights when the stars shine bright over the Nevada hills, sometimes people swear they can see two figures dancing together, eternally young, eternally in love, proof that some bonds are stronger than death and some stories never truly end.